Comment Visions is a series that we do in partnership with Euronews and in association with Shell. This is another first today because it's also, well, not quite true, the first time in a while that we've been part of EU Sustainable Energy Week, which is obviously something we're very proud to be involved with and contributing to. The theme of today's event is Decarbonising Road Transport, the Path to 2050. But before I get into some of the housekeeping, minor housekeeping points, I want to just talk about a major housekeeping point, which is a short health and safety announcement. If there is a fire in the building, this will be announced over a tannoy, which is a fancy English word for loudspeaker, in case anyone didn't know that. And I understand those doors there will open. You will be requested to leave the building, and then we will meet outside. So fingers crossed that won't be necessary, but best to be prepared. Why are we gathered here today? Well, we wanted really to get together with some high-level experts who I will introduce shortly, to talk about the EU's goal of decarbonising or reducing CO2 emissions from transport by 60% by 2050. You'll be very familiar with the targets which were outlined first by the Commission in the White Paper, the Roadmap to a Single Transport Area in 2011. The targets also of halving the use of conventionally fueled cars in urban areas by 2030 and full phase out by 2050. Of course, we're very aware of the 2020 targets and the 10% of transport fuel for renewable sources. And another important piece of legislation, the Fuel Quality Directive, which aims to lower greenhouse gas intensity of fuels by 6% by 2020. Before we come on to the running order, we just want to show you a short film which our colleagues at Comment Visions have prepared, which will act as a bit of a scene setter.
Comment Visions is hosting this live debate in the heart of Brussels. Engage in the conversation and meet other thought leaders to discuss decarbonising road transport. Before the debate begins, let's hear some of the key policy and industry issues that surround this topic.
The transport sector is one of the most important sectors which is contributing to CO2 production, which means that there is a high pressure on this sector to reduce CO2 emissions. The policy options are based on technology roadmaps. Electrified cars are 3 times more efficient than combustion engine based. But by decarbonising the energy used in our cars, we can also get at least 10 to 20% reduction in CO2 emissions. Currently is a huge research work undergoing in the development of the next much more advanced biofuels. Natural gas gives us a 25% reduction if you switch from a gasoline engine to a natural gas engine. I think the technology platforms, the PPPs like the Green Vehicle Initiative, are demonstrating that politics and industry can really work together.
UPS has the largest and probably the most diverse alternative fuel fleet, I would say, in the world. We use everything from compressed natural gas to biomethane, electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, human-powered bicycles. One of the very large opportunity that we have, it's using biomethane. We use the methane gas that comes from landfills. The other thing that we're doing, it's taking our existing diesel fleet, and where possible, we're retrofitting them to become an electric vehicle. Some of the other efforts that we're looking to improve and focus on Europe is a system whereby we can, in real time, take a look at how our engines are functioning and how we're actually using the engines. Just in 2012 alone, we've saved 206 million minutes of idling time. That number translates into having saved 14,000 metric tons of CO2.
One single solution will not allow us to fulfill the targets. So we have to combine the efficiency improvement, low carbon fuels and systems optimizations together.
Get involved in the conversation with our panel. Submit your questions via Twitter and continue the discussion online at commentvisions.com.
Good, thank you very much. And that also serves a reminder to me that you're invited to tweet and follow this event on Twitter using the hashtag CV for Comment Visions _live, and I would invite you most enthusiastically to do so. The way the debate will take place is we have 5 speakers. Each of them will have roughly 5 minutes to make some introductory remarks, which will take roughly 25 minutes. We will have a panel debate, and then we aim to have a very interactive Q&A to really give you a chance to engage with our speakers and really get to the heart of the debate. Just a few points for later on. There will be a networking reception at 6:30 when this event finishes. And you will find in front of you a feedback form, and if you could take the time to fill this out and hand it back to us, it's very useful feedback which helps us with the planning of further events. So that's quite enough housekeeping. I'd like to invite the first of our speakers today. It's Mr. Fotis Karamitsos, who's Acting Deputy Director General in the Commission's Directorate for Mobility and Transport. He has a long time of service in DG Move, and we're very much delighted that you could join us today. So, Mr. Karamitsos, over to you.
Thank you, Simon. And in this football period, I should try, let's say, not to become a sports commentator and be finishing in 5, but maybe I go to 7 minutes. So that's something to keep on with these days. Let me first starting by making reference to what you said as well on the white paper on transport, where we had to define a very integrated strategy which would allow us at the same time to meet the challenges of growing congestion, increasing oil price, excessive emissions of greenhouse gases and local pollutants, whilst at the same time, let's say, we said reducing mobility is not an option. I think that's the key message of that thing. So at the same time also increasing business competitiveness and making all the necessary elements to make European industry be competitive, let's say, in the global markets. This was the whole thing on the white paper. And then, of course, we wanted to have a sort of a more integrated strategy on that. And I think one of the main cornerstones of this strategy was to reduce the dependence of the European transport system on oil. So I think that was a key element. And because I think today already, let's say, we have a lot of imports on that, equals approximately 2.5% of GDP, 1 billion euros per day we are spending on that, and 7% of average household expenditure is gone to transport, which mainly is what we spent on oil, let's say. Also, you mentioned the targets we have for 2050 and on 2030 and even on to 2020. But I think we try to work on the 2030, working mainly on two main levels. The first is to have a more balanced use of all transport modes, and the second is see what we can do with technology, how really we can use new technologies to reduce energy consumption and reduce at the same time as well the CO2 emissions in that respect. So I think since I have this short time, I will mention 8 measures, let's say, on which we are working forward in the way forward, or we have taken already the measures. The first is, I think we work very much on alternative fuels because we believe they are needed to decarbonize, to meet the decarbonization targets and to diversify our energy resources. In particular, we are working on biofuels of 2nd and 3rd generation in order to meet these targets. The second element on transport as such is, we believe, working on the new directive on weights and dimensions for heavy goods vehicles, particularly on dimensions and the new shape we proposed, on which actually we believe that it should come as fast as possible on our market, because also it will reduce a lot the energy, and also we provide for 1 ton extra weight on these lorries in order to have this new alternative type of propulsions on that. Automobile industry is not really happy with all of it with that. Some of them, they say, we have done a lot of investments, we have to wait 8 years. Others, they say, no, let's start together quickly. And I think the Commission doesn't want to enter into that kind of debate. We believe that we need to do it quickly because we have also big export markets for that. Then on public transport, I think we have called the 2011 white paper for achieving essentially a CO2-free city logistics in the major urban centers by 2030, and for phasing out the use of conventionally fueled cars in cities by 2050. It's a very ambitious target, but I think it's not undoable. Another area where we're working much and on which we believe a lot can be contributed to the energy efficiency and reduction of CO2 is the using of intelligent transport systems in a more integrated manner, what we can use information and communication technology to do that. As a fifth element, I would say it is the working very much on multimodal transport, and on that also the ICT can help us much more to provide integrated multimodal management and information systems to make it much more working in the future. I think it is the multimodal transport is one of the key elements to achieve the objectives of the white paper. Then another area which we believe, and you mentioned that already, that we have to work very much is on the new technologies and research. The Horizon 2020 provides us a lot of options to see how we can, in the short term, we can work on reducing dependence on energy of the classical energy approaches and see how it can be with alternative fuels. And so we look very much to demonstration activities from our side in the Horizon 2020. And then I should not forget to mention the Trans-European networks and the Connecting Europe facility, because there indeed one of the main targets is how we can really promote this alternative infrastructure and build this alternative infrastructure. And another more controversial issue on which people always come up with the automobile industry in particular, no, the automobile clubs in particular, is the road charging, on which we believe road pricing and elements like that in the future take into account the internalization of external costs will very much help, let's say, in reducing this energy dependency on oil. So, and reduce consumption and make much more mobility efficient in the future. So these are, I would say, the 8 measures on which we would like maybe to continue the discussion with the colleagues in the panel. And I think the directive that has been just, let's say, moved forward on the deployment of alternative fuels infrastructure is a key element of that. I think there we managed to bring Parliament and Council closer together. Maybe some people say, the Council didn't give us what we wanted at this, the Parliament was more, why the Commission gave in. I think it is something that we believe from our side that it is a staged approach that we have. Let's have something on the table if it's not perfect even, but then we can build on that. If we have nothing on the table, we continue talking. This creates obligations to member states. The member states, they wanted to have the obligations. Let's see how they are going to meet these obligations. I'm going to have fun. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker is perfectly placed, well, from my point of view at least, Johann Friedrich-Kohlmann, who's head of the Division for Transport, Buildings and Urban Development at the German Permanent Representation, and I guess the person who's been sat in the same room with Mr. Karamitsos when these things have been discussed in the Council of Ministers. So maybe you could tell us about your priorities for the best way forward for decarbonisation, but also it seems that the member states are always holding back and watering down the ambitions of some of these initiatives. Maybe you can talk to us about that as well.
Yes, thank you. It's only now that I realize that I'm supposed to be the bad guy here.
No.
Try to explain a little bit our motivation and
I try to be the good guy. That's
Now, seriously, I think decarbonization has several advantages, but also several challenges, and I'd like to point out some of them. Fotis Karamitsos has mentioned most of the advantages, so we have to try to find a way to get away from the oil dependence of transport. We have to reduce the import dependence, which in this time is quite an important target. CO2 pollution reduction, all that is important. In the long run, if you see the price of oil increasing over the last decades, in the long run, there will be a point when transport will become unaffordably expensive unless we move to other means of transport and clean fuel. And by doing that, we also can develop EU leadership in clean transport technology and, of course, in the long run, guarantee the sustainability of our transport in Europe. The main challenge is the time. You mentioned that. 2050 is now 36 years ahead. If we look 36 years back in the other direction, we end up 1978, and those who were here remember that this was the time of the second oil crisis. And already in the first crisis in 1973 and later, people said that we need to look in alternative sources for cars, for transport. Not much has happened since then, but I think now is the point of no return, and I'd like to point out some of the things that have changed by then. Currently, the use of clean fuel is still held back by the high costs of vehicles, as you are aware, lack of infrastructure, and there's a vicious circle because refueling stations are not being built because there's not enough vehicles. Vehicles are not sold at competitive prices because there's not enough demand. Consumers do not buy vehicles because they are so expensive. The stations are not there, so we have a vicious circle. Especially a problem for electric vehicles. A traditional fuel station in Germany serves 3,000 vehicles in average. Electric vehicles, you would need at least one refueling station, for instance at home, maybe even two when you're going to work and want to refuel there, so you need a much higher number of refueling stations. For other fuels, the situation is easier. Today, Germany, we have 14,000 traditional fuel stations, only 4,500 electric charging points, and less than 1,000 stations for natural gas, but these figures are increasing. Again, incentives are needed for stimulating investment in clean vehicles, and therefore Germany is preparing national legislation. Hopefully we will be coming forward with a proposal before the summer break with the intention to provide incentives such as special registration plates, permission to use special parking zones, permission to use bus and taxi lanes, reduction of the taxable amount for private use of company cars, and so on, because these cars are more expensive and therefore you would have to pay more taxes. Looking at the current situation, you see that it is a high ambition that we want to reach 1 million vehicles by 2020. Looking at the figures last year, Germany registered 6,000 electric vehicles, but you also have to look at the trend, and the trend is very impressive. In the last years, it has been 100% plus every year, so 6,000 last year, but we have already reached 6,000 by the middle of this year. So if we continue in 100% direction, then you can easily calculate that by 2020 we will get to the 1 million figure. And this is only, we will of course not may be able to continue in 100% growth rates. This is only talking about electric, fully electric vehicles, which now have 13% of the fleet, most important being hybrid with 60% and natural gas with 17%. And by the way, of course, these new cars also help us to meet our CO2 figures. They average went down last year, -4%, to a level of 134 grams CO2 per passenger car now. One important advantage of the clean fuels is that we have a variety of technical options which allows individual solutions. So if somebody, for instance, has high mileage, short distance, returns regular to a home base, then he's the ideal candidate for an electric vehicle. For instance, taxis, car sharing, delivery services. Somebody who doesn't drive a lot may not be interested in an electric vehicle, but something like natural gas, hybrid, or something else. In the meantime, we have to look at some of the challenges, like safety concerns. Consumers are afraid of safety features. Limited range. They, of course, want to wait for technological improvements. They hope for a decrease in price as the market takes up. That all makes it very difficult. Question, should governments subsidize clean vehicles? I think in a way we do, because today traditional passenger cars pay roughly 5 cents per kilometers in mineral oil taxes. So this amounts up to 1,000 euros per year. Alternative fuels don't pay these, so you could easily calculate the amount of subsidy by not paying these taxes over a car lifetime. Now, on the EU level, Fotis Karamitsos has mentioned that we have made an important step by the agreement between Council, Parliament and Commission on the Clean Fuel Directive. And the target of this directive is to escape the vicious circles. I think most of you are aware of this, so I don't have to inform you about the details. Hopefully this will enter into force before the end of the year. And then member states will have to adopt national policy frameworks for the market development. They will inform the Commission about their framework within 2 years after entry into force. And then we have to set targets for electricity for cars, electricity for ships, hydrogen, LNG for ships, LNG for trucks, CNG, and so on. Most important, of course, is the technical standards that we could agree to make sure that we have not 28 networks, but one single network with all being compatible with each other and making Europe one continent and hopefully a technology leader worldwide. Important it will be to have user information. Somebody coming to any refueling station should be aware the amount of money he pays, not only for that unit he wants, but he may be able to compare what this means in terms of kilometers or in terms of kilowatts or whatever he can compare to traditional fuels. And as we have already heard, it will be important to fund some technology research projects, and investment will be, of course, made possible through Connecting Europe Facility, Horizon 2020 and so on.
Okay, thanks very much.